Hello, welcome back to Galactic Reviews, and we got done reading Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, the comic book. The individual issues have been collected into a series, and I know it's being expanded more on, but we're talking about the 5 issues. I think it's the 5 issues. I
Yes,
believe it's the
I
five
believe it's five.
issues. Okay, first 5 issues of The Last Ronin have been compiled into one of these things. I think there's the Last Ronin, just the normal hardcover, and then I think there might be like an ultimate edition or something that maybe has like different character designs or something. But
Yeah,
regardless, this has been out for not that long actually. This is relatively new. It's 2021, I want to say, is when this comic book run was done. That is weird. Usually they have it right in the front. Oh well.
find out later. I just scratched out all the information.
Well, I know it's recently new just because no, it's usually it's right on the
I know
front
it.
page.
Yeah,
So usually it's
I know
right
it's
on the
only. I know we've talked about it for the last few years, so it's been out
it's been
for
talked about for the last few
about
years, and
3, maybe 4 years. I think it's only been 3, 2021, maybe
yeah, and it
2020.
says since 2022, and this is the eighth printing. So eighth printing of 2003, 2023. So maybe it's only been out for a year or two. I think it's been out
Or maybe that collection has only been out for,
maybe, and maybe the comic book has been out since maybe 2019.
yeah, maybe.
But
Yeah.
regardless, relatively new. It's a, put it bluntly, it is a sort of Dark Knight Returns version of what the Ninja Turtles would go through. It's a Dark Knight Returns sort of inspired story for the Ninja Turtles.
The
That is
simplest way.
basically that's the simplest way to put it. For somebody who's one to doesn't know anything about it, is one to get into it. I believe it is the ending for the it's the ending for the IDW's version of the Turtles, not necessarily the Mirage version of the Turtles, from what I remember reading at the back ends of it. Somebody's probably going to say I'm wrong, but from what I remember reading on the back pages of it, that was what it said. Because Eastman kind of talks a little bit about that with him and this other guy, Tom Waltz,
Yeah.
and how like he and Laird kind of thought of this concept a little bit a while ago with the Mirage Turtles, but they never enacted upon it. And then because it just blew up, and then he came back to this, and then came with this. He and Tom sort of created this idea. So I don't know how much. It seems like Eastman actually had a decent part in it. I don't know how much Laird had a part in it, but Eastman at least had a big part in this story. Overall, uh, I like. I think the story is fine. There are things I like, things I don't like. I'm curious what you think because you read this first,
I
and you
did.
were and you were praising it a lot.
Yes, I really enjoyed most most all of it. There were things I didn't like, or didn't care for how they were portrayed. One of which we'll just get right off the bat. The death of Raphael.
Yeah,
I thought it makes sense to an extent, but at the same time, it doesn't. You would think he would have a better advantage in aquatic fighting.
yeah. Well, that, and you would also expect the turtles to go out in epic proportions, and the way Raph went out was kind of
I mean, it was kind
lame.
of epic. It was
Well, the
kind of
fight,
epic.
the
He
fight
ran
leading up
into,
to the way that he
yeah,
his last fight was good. Just his last fight really sucked.
yes, I will agree with that. I thought that was very
So,
poorly done, but definitely kind of a
and it could
rough way
have
to
been
go out.
because I mean, it was his fight. It was a fight with Karai. It was him versus Karai. That could have been a really, really interesting and fun and well shown fight scene, and it
Well, the
wasn't.
thing is, I don't know. I'd have to go back when I get it back, and check. I don't know if each death like flashback has the same number of pages. If they
I have
do,
no
maybe they
idea.
were just running out of the page number they would have for the flashbacks.
I have
And they just
no
said,
idea.
just do it that way. So that that could be an interesting way of why they chose that path. If not, I think
Uh,
they should have added a few more pages for Raph.
I don't think so. And the reasoning that I can think of is because the flashbacks for Leo and Donnie kind of take place at roughly the same time. Because the flashbacks, and that's when Donnie and Splinter split up
Yeah.
with, and so it all leads up to the same thing. Like it all starts from
Well,
the same place, whereas Raph's kind of just happens.
yeah, Graphs kind of just happens.
So
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Raph's kind of just happens. It doesn't give you how many years have passed since Raph died.
it does.
Does it?
I think it says
I
roughly
don't remember.
10. I think it says roughly
10
10
years?
years.
Holy
Roughly 10
cow.
years.
10 years without Raphael?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, roughly 10 years.
That's a long time.
I can go and check because I know roughly where
So,
it is.
yeah, so how old was it when he died then?
Well, I have no idea. It doesn't really explicitly say. What I remember it
Because if
saying
that's the
was,
case, if it was 10 years and then Michelangelo disappeared for I forget how many years after the rest of them died.
well, it says here when he takes when Hiroto becomes the
Next
next master, it says it has been 10 years since my beloved mother and our former master Oroku Karai was critically injured. So you can gather from that it's been 10 years since Raph's death.
wow.
So
If that's the case, then that I'm more surprised that they
and I get why for that length to kind of for like Oroku Hiroto's character, it makes sense, but
yeah, but then that just
it's
means
still
then
a long
at that point
time.
wouldn't they have just eradicated all of the foot from
Yeah,
since they had no more leaders in New York?
yeah,
There just seems to be because I didn't put those two together um or pay that much attention to that. Um but if that's the case, wow,
yeah,
that seems a little bit too long of a time period, I suppose. But other than Raph's death being absolutely disappointing for his character, Splinter's personality. If the thing was, if it's been 10 years since Raph died, I mean, the only other reason was, I mean, I don't know. The personality of Splinter acting like that just it doesn't fit him as a character for him
yeah.
to go out.
Like for the way that he did, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he's still. It's not like
Oops.
it would be different if like all his sons had just died and then he acted like that. But he had
Like,
one with
yeah,
him.
I would agree if like he watched Donatello die in
Like if
front of him.
Donnie had died right in front of him, along with knowing thinking that Leo and Mikey had died as well in New York, um, I could see him acting like that. But Donnie was still there. Donnie was the one that was somewhat level headed, and that was something that
Which
Donnie and
is,
Splinter seemed to both share more so over Leo, Raph, and Mikey.
I mean,
As Leo
yes,
could be
because the
provoked to anger, but it took a little bit. But he
yes,
could.
he tried to be as
So
level-headed as he could.
yeah,
Um, but that was another thing. We saw, I think, out the least the Ninja Turtle we saw the least of, I think, was Leo.
yeah, I'd have to agree with
And
that actually.
him as a personal his character.
Yeah,
Um, because even when Michelangelo is talking to himself as if he's with talking to his brothers, um, I think you hear more Donatello and Raphael than Leonardo. I don't know why, if like Michelangelo just doesn't have the same connection as he does with Raphael and Mike Donatello,
yeah,
which thinking of how he interacts with all of them kind of makes the most sense because I know he has more
yeah.
interactions with those two than Leonardo.
Depends on the continuity. Like I said, I don't
Yeah, it
know
depends on the continuity, but I mean
because the
specifically with Raph. he has a lot of interactions with because they just are polar opposites.
Yeah,
Um, and then he looks at Donatello for more toys, pretty much.
yeah. But he also looks to Leo for guidance a lot of times
Yes, which I was mostly surprised he didn't get much of, and when he did, he kind of ignored it,
throughout the book.
the book, yeah. Or he
Yeah.
would acknowledge that it existed, but then pretty much say, and that's why you're dead.
Which I mean, good comeback, but
He's a very, to an extent I do understand. He needs to be a lot more, he's a lot more dead inside after all of that happening, thinking everyone he's ever known is dead.
yeah.
So to that extent, I understand the personality change, but you would think when he's talking to his brothers, mentally, it would be a little bit different, I suppose.
Yeah, and that also might be different depending on how long he's actually been having this go on, because we're never told
Yeah,
how long
well,
this goes on
true,
in his head.
true.
Yeah, I think I talked to you about this a little bit with the way that Donnie and Leo went out. They went out epic. Donnie, Leo, Casey, and Splinter. They went out epically, but it
I will
wasn't
say, yeah,
shown epically.
yeah,
Like in the story, they do go out epically, but it isn't shown as them going out in an epic form or fashion.
yeah, yeah. I can agree. Like Donnie, 100% that man went out as a hero. Um,
Yes, but the only thing you see is him with, you only see one shot of him with a whole bunch of arrows, and you never see him kind of like in a Boromir kind of scenario where
yeah,
he's constantly getting back up to fight him off and defend his father after getting shot again and
yeah,
again and again, which I think is what they were going for, but they did a poor job of illustrating it.
yes.
Same
And
can
then
be said with Leo and Casey, where they kind of just
with Leo
exploded.
and Casey, it was one of those things. It was like they were fighting the Mausers, and then all of a sudden, a whole group comes in, and they're like, ah, you know what? I'm bored of this. Just detonate them.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you could have done that, just do that from the start.
Well, I think the reason they gave was because they wanted to capture the Fugitoid.
Oh, well,
Well,
yeah,
Baxter
no, that's
Stockman wanted to
true.
capture the
They wanted to,
Fugitoid, and when
they
Fugitoid
wanted to
said
capture him.
he wasn't going to let him be captured and he'd rather blow up, and he's like,
No,
"Well,
that's
I guess
true.
wish granted." So,
Yeah, that's true. No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
but I will say I'm just surprised that like Mikey escaped scot free. It seemed like April also escaped. She didn't escape scot free, but she did it. She
Yeah.
did get out of the explosion. Um, it makes sense why Leo and Casey were killed immediately to some extent, but
Also, it brings up
it's
later on that there were other survivors from the explosion,
yes, and
but
they would have also been.
we never
The
personally
problem is
get
they also would have,
introduced to them
yeah, they also would have been in that room as well, which
either in that room or helping others like try to like civilians try to escape.
yeah, well, most of the other
But
combatants, I
most of
think,
them, yeah,
besides a
most of
few,
them were in the room, I believe.
yeah, so it doesn't make any sense for why Leo and Casey couldn't make it, but all these other normal humans could,
Well, I
when
know that
at
they were
least
on, yeah, true.
when at least you could make an argument for Leo being like he's all banged up, his shell is cracked in multiple places and barely hanging on, but he's survived and was captured
Casey's just dead.
by the foot. Casey would probably just be dead, but then again, they also
The
make
only
April
way
live, so
the only way I could see Casey potentially living is if Leo shielded him from the blast and Leo died. One of them
well,
would have had to die.
yeah, one of them would have had to die, for sure, because it was just that massive of a thing. But
I
yeah,
think it would have fit Leo's personality to shield Casey. But at the same time, what happens in milliseconds reaction speed is rather low.
yeah, true. For Casey and April's daughter, Casey
I'm
Marie.
was not a I was somewhat interested into the character, and then when I found out she was also a mutant,
Mutant's a stretch.
yeah, a stretch. But when I found out she has like the same genetic mutation, I suppose,
She supposedly does, but she
as
looks
the
no
turtles,
different,
I
which threw me
kind
off.
of yeah, I kind of became less interested in the character
Yeah,
because I'm like it doesn't make any sense. You're gonna add this new character, say she's has the same weird mutation as everyone
yeah.
else.
Well, what I didn't like care for that much was like she acted very headstrong, acted very brash and kind of
I mean, kind of like Casey Jones,
yeah,
but like
but
younger Casey Jones.
yeah, but Casey Jones is also a more masculine character and she is female. It just felt like an excuse to explain why she's able to just take out these Sinjas, I think is what they call them, in
I
just like a few punches where
think
like
so.
Mikey kind of struggled a little bit.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, they did
Even though she
add,
has way
yeah,
less skill than Mikey, even though when it was
and
shown
they made that
provable.
brutally honest.
Yeah, I know.
In
If it was
like, you could say she can take them out, not
uh,
to the same extent as Mikey, but
yeah,
still take them out and say that's because she has the same mutation
yes,
as Mikey.
but
But being able
she
to do it more efficiently
yeah,
doesn't make sense when Mikey has trained his whole life to fight and destroy these things.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
so has she, but not with the same level of training.
mhm. And along with that, she's a female character that acts in a very masculine way, and I get that there are tomboys. There's a tomboy stereo. There's a tomboy sort of archetype. This didn't feel at all like that,
I don't
and I don't
know,
know. I don't know if that's just. I don't know if that's just me. If it, I feel like if it
her
was,
character felt a little weird, but
yeah,
at the same time, I, I somewhat understand it because her mother is the head of pretty much the underground organization that is against the foot.
I don't know if she's the
So,
head of it. I thought she
I
was
mean,
just on her own, doing her own things, waiting. Well, maybe she is. I don't know. They weren't
I would think she would.
explicitly,
They didn't explicitly say anything, but I would assume she's probably the head or like one of the heads,
yeah,
and she's been a part of this group for the whole time. So I understand like the rough, kind of more aggressive
yeah,
demeanor she has, like
yeah.
the underground kind of thug.
But
Um,
then again, she acts like Casey, even though she's never known Casey.
yeah, I
So
mean,
how would she be able to
Casey's
emulate him a lot?
yeah, Casey's backstory makes
Whereas
sense
if it
because
was,
like everything Casey knew was destroyed, while hers was kind of similar, but she never knew any
she,
of it to begin with.
yeah, and if it was a son trying to emulate his father and try to, basically being surrounded by this stuff,
Look, I was just waiting for like a cricket bat to show up in her hand at some point. I would have been very upset, but I
I
was
would have
kind of
been
waiting
upset.
for it.
I would have been upset at that. Like if it
Look,
was,
if she put on a hockey mask to go into battle,
I would have understood
something
that because
something like that, I mean, I would think, oh, that's kind of cool as an
that
homage to your
yeah,
father.
that would
Um,
have been very reminiscent because I mean it's done in one of his future in a show one of his future one of
oh
their
yeah,
future
yeah, yeah.
grandkids has he doesn't necessarily has a mask but he has that mask as a sort of a symbol that he
Hmm.
uses kind of
Yep.
to for in order to honor his grandparents. So
Yeah.
I would have understood that. I just think
I would think it would have been far, like not far-fetched, but I don't know. I think it would have been interesting to do that.
going back to the whole um Casey Marie thing, I think it would have worked better if she was their son, not their daughter. Am I wrong in thinking that? because especially with her emulating her father a lot more than what normal daughters would.
I could see it, but at the same time, I understand what they were trying to do. But it's, I'm trying to think, were there any other females besides her at all that we saw throughout this besides her mother?
Mm, Karai, but after that, that's about it. I think there might have been
I
a
mean,
few in her crew background characters, but
it
that's
might have
not
been,
nobody
but
prominent.
like I would have enjoyed it if she had a little bit more of her own personality than kind of a copy and paste of her
Casey in
father's.
yeah, Casey in a female form.
Just more like she had her own personality a little bit, like she wanted to train, but we didn't get to see enough of that character, I suppose.
Which I guess is why I'm thinking maybe it would have worked better as a son because it emulates Casey so much, and Casey being a very masculine character, especially in the early renditions. He's got a lot of built pent up anger and stuff going on, which you see a lot in Casey Marie. I don't know. That's just
Yeah, I think
I
if they just gave her a bit of her own personality besides just kind of a copy and paste of her father's.
yeah, and I don't know if I would have liked a straight up copy and paste of if it was the son of
Yeah,
Casey as
I
well. But
agree with that.
I think with how little with there being some difference, but there also still being enough of it being more reminiscent of the father than the mother, I could
Yeah.
see, especially
Like
when
I
the character grew
like,
up with the mother for the
yeah,
most
like
part,
I
it would make more sense if that
understand.
character was the son instead of a
hmm
daughter.
Like I understand the fact of she's aggressive and she fights. So I understand that, but the rest of her personality just seems too much like Casey. And all she's ever heard from Casey or the Turtles are just stories.
Yeah,
So it's wondering of how she managed to get that personality. I understand where where she's living makes sense to how she could get that personality, but at the same time, I kind of want her to have a little bit of her own, make her a little bit more unique, I suppose.
yeah,
Like, give us a reason to draw to this specific character besides just saying it's Casey's daughter that's pretty much just like
yeah.
Casey Jones
And I
in
mean, they've done that
aggression.
with in TMNT in the TMNT show. They did that with Cody Jones. Like he was their great grandkid, but
hmm
he was still his own character. He was smart like April, yet wanted to fight like Casey Jones, but
Yes.
yet also didn't have the was still young and didn't know how to do it, much like April didn't. And when they first met her,
And yeah, in the very beginning, yeah.
but he was a very much tech whiz like his mom. And when he had the capabilities of fighting, he was very much capable of fighting, much like his dad
hmm
or like his great grandfather. So I mean,
yeah, I think they went to the route of not wanting to, since this is technically Michelangelo's story, not wanting to give too much of a new character out, but at the
yeah,
same time, I don't think it was what was wanted or needed. If you're going to give us a new character,
yeah.
make it a new character, give it their own personality. Don't just try to be like, oh, well, we'll make it like this character because everyone knows this character. It's a well-liked character,
Well,
and it's her father.
I think especially with the situations they put the character in, and as well as what she was doing, it's at that point I
Yeah.
think they got
I mean, you
at
would have
some points.
also thought she would have been more tech savvy, smarter, since she was staying with her mother and
Yeah,
helped her build the um shoot, what is it called? The tank.
Well, that's the thing. Well, that would have actually been a good concept, like especially with her. Well, with her being well, essentially with her essentially having like mutant powers where she's like
Hmm.
super strong and stuff. She's not as much of a brute as her father, and she's more tech savvy, which makes her more predictable, which kind of leans in more.
I don't know.
But I think
She was
I just think it would have worked better with a son instead of a daughter. I don't know
I
why,
mean
but I think it would have.
it could have but I don't know. I just think her character in general just if it had its own if she had her own personality, it would
Yeah,
make her more unique and stand out as an individual character
yeah,
more. But with her pet personality being more like Casey, having it as a son, I can see it.
yeah, and especially with the whole thing of Mikey being like one of the stories come to life of her father and her wanting Casey wanting to know more about her dad. That would be something that more so I don't really see a daughter wanting that much
Wanting to
or
know more about her, the
wanting
only
near as
thing,
much as a son
yeah,
would.
the only thing I can understand, like wanting to know more about her father from another person's viewpoint. Um,
Because
learning
that
how
kind
to
of well, go ahead.
learning
Go ahead.
how to fight. I understand it. They're going into the final battle, but at that point, it's mostly you can get a few pointers, but you can't really
Yeah,
overhaul your whole fighting technique.
yeah. Well, also, it reminds me of a scene from Batman the animated series where he finds a where Batman finds a doctor and all this stuff and ends up that's like working underneath for like a gang and sort of like the gang doctor or whatever. And the gang doctor gets freed, gets put to somewhat custody, kind of gets on trial and has to work like community services. Batman goes and views him as Bruce Wayne. During this whole time, Batman finds out that him, Dr. Leslie Thompson, and his dad were all colleagues and good friends during when they were going to doctor school. And so Bruce Wayne goes to see this doctor. The doctor automatically thinks like this guy just wants publicity or something. He wants something from him, like money wise or something.
Hmm.
And Bruce just asked, "Tell me about my dad." And it's one of the things where it felt like that's something they were trying to go with this in a little bit of a subliminal way. And that's something that, much like they did in the Batman animated TV show, that I could see coming more so from a son's perspective than a daughter's
Um,
perspective.
I think in general, it's mostly of a
But I guess that
children,
yeah,
like an orphaned children, um, type of response, just to want to know more about their parent in general.
yeah,
So I don't see that one being like more demographically to one or the other with that
yeah.
kind of question.
Or maybe
Um,
I'm just overthinking it. It's just one of
but
those things where I think it would have worked better one way than the other way. But
I think just give the character their own personality.
yeah, that might have helped out. That
That
might have
would have
helped
helped
out
out a
more.
lot.
I think it would have helped out more because then I want to be able to make like all these comparisons of like, well, why
Yeah,
this guy acts a
agreed.
lot like Casey. It would make sense if this was his son. Why he acts a lot
Casey
more like
Jr.
Casey.
Yeah, at this
He's a
point, just
leader
call it
of
Casey Jr.
he's a leader of a gang that's fighting against this group. That's something Casey would do and not something that April would do. And it makes no sense because this kid's never met Casey yet.
Yes, like if she was raised by Casey, then yes, I could
And
100% see that as
and
being
it
her personality.
and it would be different if Casey was the one that, yeah, like you said, raising her. That would be different. But it's April that's raising her, and she's only heard stories about Casey. If the kid is gonna emulate the father that's gone missing, that's something I see more of a son doing than a daughter doing. So,
Yeah,
but
I agree with that. I really do. But the ending, what did you think of the ending?
I think part of me thinks it was well. Partially, I think it's rushed. I don't like how the character survives a giant fall.
Yeah, it seemed
and
more,
then
yeah.
gets, and the way he dies is by bleed out, even though he's technically got all this internal bleeding. Um,
I mean,
and the
if
way that
anything,
he
he
gets,
suffered,
he did suffer, but
which is kind of what Mikey wanted.
yeah, well, like it says in the beginning of the thing when he's healing from those wounds, they say, well, your shell's hardened a lot. You got a better healing system, has mutated, has gotten better with age,
Hmm.
and it doesn't seem to be implemented any other than that point. And even though
Yeah,
he's been cut, he does bandage it up. So it seems weird that he bleeds out. It seems like they make it seem like he either bleeds out from that, or the way that he dies is by when he Hiroto by holds up Hiroto and he gets electrocuted. I think's how it happens.
I think so. It,
It doesn't. That's very faint. I'm gonna look it up.
yeah.
I'm
It,
pretty
it,
sure that's how that happens. So he overloads himself, it seems, here,
mm,
right? It seems like he
yeah.
overloads himself. And so he kills himself, it seems, which I think is a stupid way to go out. But that's just me. And then
I was gonna say
Mikey's,
definitely not the honorable way to go out, but that family was never honorable to begin with.
especially this character wasn't honorable. Karai had
Yeah.
some of that. Shredder did not. But Karai had some of that. But
Hmm.
the more involved she became with her father's stuff, the less honorable she became.
Yeah.
But I just, I, if that whole thing felt weirdly rushed.
Yeah. And then
So
and then it ends with them having four more turtles.
yeah, that's so that way they can do more stuff. And I don't like that. I don't
I don't I
what
don't like that because the thing is Shredder tried for the longest time to mimic recreating them
yeah.
and failed so many times. So now they're going to just happenstance succeed.
Oh yeah, they do.
Exactly. With
So
four more turtles. The question
yeah.
is, where's the rat?
Well, I think Casey Marie is supposed to be the rat.
Yeah,
So
the one with no training.
yeah.
Like that whole
Oh,
ninja line is dead.
but he left her a book.
Like the only thing that I could see is if she goes to Japan, learns from them, and then comes back.
So yeah. One thing I will say though is I don't like how Mikey essentially gets good by reading a book.
Oh,
Like
better at fighting? Is
yeah,
that what
like
you mean?
yeah, like he gets
Well,
better by
like,
reading a book. Like it would have made more sense if
well, like,
he read
I
the
mean,
book and then you saw some moments where he was either training the stuff he learned from the book or
well, he
using
did
it fighting
say,
gangs in
yeah,
Japan and
he
learning
did
how
say,
to.
yeah, he did say like he was training in the mountains by himself. But I do understand what you're getting at. But also you have to think Splinter gave them each their weapons specifically to counteract their personalities.
Mhm.
You have Leonardo was given the swords because he didn't want to hurt people, so it was more to give him more self-restraint. Raphael was given the size because they're supposed to be kind of dull and rounded on the ends. Um, but he sharpened them. Um, I forget why he was given size specifically. Um, and not like a I can't think of what it's called. Not a bow staff. The
Nunchucks.
not nunchucks. The hand stick that I can't think of what it, like a police baton almost. But
Oh,
the
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't think of what it's the weapon's called.
I have no idea
Um
either, but I know what you're talking about.
yeah, I would have I feel like that makes a little bit more sense for like what he was going for, but I understand the size there more iconic, I suppose. Um the bow staff to Donatello because Donatello liked to overthink everything, so he was given something very simple.
Mhm.
And the nunchucks because they required the most focus, and Michelangelo had zero focus.
Yeah, because I know with nunchucks, if you too little energy, they don't do squat. Too much energy, they bounce back and hit you.
Hmm.
So
So, like, I understand how Michelangelo was able to learn everything because he had a lot of innate focus and concentration from using the nunchucks
yeah,
and watching his other siblings fight and use them. It makes sense how he was able to learn them because I'm sure fighting, sparring with them also helped while they were younger.
well,
But I would have enjoyed, yeah, seeing like a small montage of him training with them, trying to learn how to use them properly and efficiently.
it's not that. It's not that he didn't know how to use all the other weapons, because I mean, in some things, depending on I guess depending on the continuity, the turtles all know how to use each other's weapons. They were trained not to rely on their weapons a lot.
Yes,
So it
I mean
makes
that is
sense why
true.
he's able
Yes.
to master a lot of these weapons. What I'm most concerned with is why he's able to. He said he's read this book, read a whole bunch of techniques that he otherwise ignored for the most part in his youth, and
Hmm.
he's just able to implement them like that. Whereas I would like to have just
Okay, I
something
understand.
more was something more was needed, because I
Well,
can
the
read a
thing
book on
was
playing the piano. That doesn't mean I can
true,
play the piano well.
true.
So just because you know something doesn't mean you know
The
how to
thing,
implement it.
the only thing I can think of is if he was trying to read this to learn how to do it, but he's seen like his siblings do that specific move before efficiently,
Mhm.
and he was trying to figure out how to mimic them more
Yeah,
efficiently.
and
So that
it,
that's the only way I can kind of understand how he was able to teach himself.
yeah, and it would be
Unless
different.
he's just like a master.
Yeah, well, if he's not, it would be different if he had a dummy like Raph often has
Yeah,
training with. But in the book, if I'm not mistaken, he was just meditating
on the mountain.
on that mountain until like a gang shows up and he beats the crap out of him. But that's the only time we actually see him beat up a gang
Hmm.
and showing any type of training. And even in that time when he's fighting the gang, he's like, "Time to go back home." Like that's the only training that we know of, like hand to hand combatant training that we know of
Yeah,
that he has before he heads back home.
yeah.
So
Which is odd because I would have thought maybe he would have gone to whatever the clan is, um, and
yeah,
like tried to destroy that clan before he left, just to try to erase it off the face of the map. Because I don't know if they said they did that after Splinter died.
I think. Well, they keep on saying this is time for the Hamato line to end, but
Yeah,
there's a
but then
whole
they,
clan of the
but the,
Hamato line that
yeah,
Mikey
but the
meets.
thing is, yeah, but the thing is, I'm not sure if all of them fled to New York and they were wiped out from Japan.
It seemed
It
like they all
didn't,
stayed there.
yeah, it didn't say, but after Splinter died, I know, what's his name said he would avenge Splinter and fight to destroy them. I'm pretty sure. Like, I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read that specific part.
Yeah,
Um, but I would just think if you're going after the head of that clan, why not just finish them off in Japan and then go back and use that as your training, I suppose.
I'm trying to check because I don't remember that at all in the story where he
I mean, I
says
could
he's
just
going
be like,
to.
I could just be forcing it into my imagination because it makes more sense.
No, it just says Mike Master Shinichiro offered to let Mikey stay with the clan, but he decided not to stay and decided to leave because all the warriors there kind of reminded him too much of his brothers. So he
Well,
left
yeah.
into the mountains. So it doesn't say anything about that part of the clan
Well, I,
going over.
yeah, because I can't remember if after, no, I think he just said, after, Splinter and Donatello went to did like their final battle. I think they just said kill everyone that's before they flee. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much what it was.
That was
But
what he
still,
ordered before, like his general
yeah,
said, no, we're gonna die if we stay here. We're gonna leave.
yeah.
So
But at the same time, I'm like, if that's the case, just do a training montage of him training in the mountains, going to where they live in Japan, wiping out that whole clan in Japan, and then going to New York and finish the job.
yeah.
And have that training arc be him fighting and killing the clan in Japan. Like that would have been more interesting, I
Yeah.
suppose. More of makes more sense for him in how he's so much better at combat.
Yeah. He gets thrown out of the tower in the worst way possible in that first
Yeah.
issue.
hmm Honestly, him just
Some
surviving
of this
that
just
was
Yeah. Some
very,
of this just seems like they had a story lined up. They knew what they wanted to do at some instances, but they didn't know how to get from A to B. And so they just chose what they thought would work the best
yeah.
when it feels like they didn't put enough thought into it.
It's one of those
But
things, if they had more that they could have worked with besides just doing 5 issues,
yeah,
I see this going and being a lot better. I mean, you can say that about just about anything,
yeah,
but giving us a little bit more detail of like how he trained, giving Casey more of a unique personality, something.
yeah. I don't some there's a lot of things that I think me and you could point to that throughout the story, both just us on a personal level relating of us viewing the story and just in the story in
Yeah,
general, where I think we get an understanding of where we see sort of a why this isn't as good as what we would hope for, even though it's still all right.
it's
It's not
still, I
as
mean,
good
it's
as
still
what we would
good. Not, yeah, there are
not as
things that I'm disappointed with
yeah,
on how it was portrayed, but I still think it's good. Like standalone, I think it's good. Just I wish it had more detail, I suppose.
yeah.
Was more refined.
I wish the backstories were more fleshed out. I wish the story was more thought out. I wish some of the characters
Like
were more fleshed out.
the first 3 issues I thought were very, very good. The fourth one was pretty good. But like we said, Casey had too much of her father's personality, not her own personality.
Mhm.
And then the fifth one, the final issue, I mean, it was just a little rushed and just kind of, it's like, we know he's going to win, we know he's going to die. It's mostly of how it's going to happen.
Yeah, and the fights aren't as epic as you would want them to be.
Yeah.
They're just not. And I
Yeah.
think that's the most disappointing part about this. It's
Yeah.
like these are supposed to be these guys' last fights, and they're nowhere near as epic to the proportion that you would want them to be at all. So
Yeah. A little under, not a little, very undercut. The only one, like we said, Raphael's, that one was done very well for a final fight, besides how he died. Um,
I think how he goes out, like essentially taking out a whole Foot Clan
Battalion,
section
army.
battalion on his own, and then going up to Karai. Besides the fight with Karai, everything else was decently well done. It's just that
Yes.
fight with Karai sucked. With
Yes.
the way Leo and Casey went out, with them essentially having like a last stand, it needed to be better fleshed out. It needed to be better
I think
shown.
if we saw more of them fighting, I think that would have been
Yeah.
fine. But
Same
we
with
didn't
same with
see
Donnie.
that.
Same with Donnie.
With Donnie, we saw just a little bit more
Yeah,
fighting than we did with
barely.
Leo.
And even then, I don't like the way that Splinter went out because the way that Splinter goes out, he's goes out making a stupid decision that I don't think
which
Splinter
is
would
very
make.
unusual for Splinter.
Yeah.
He prides himself in being patient,
Yeah.
and
And I
that
would,
was definitely not his personality.
and it's like we said before, I think it would make more sense if he did that if all four of his sons had been supposedly killed.
Either all four of them,
And at that point,
or if he just watched Donatello die in front of him,
yeah,
then
that
I
would have
could see that
been,
happen.
yeah,
Um, him losing another son, I could see him doing that, but he didn't. And if he said this is for Raphael when he went in and did his like charge for an attack,
mhm,
I could somewhat understand that, but he didn't do that either.
yeah,
He just kind of just went out there and did what he did. Yeah, it was some of the deaths were very disappointing. I wish we got to see more of like their last stand. It was a good concept. I still think it was good. I just wish it we had more of it.
yeah.
Was more flushed out than what we got. Still I would have to give this I'll give this a 7 out of 10.
I was gonna give this a 6, 6.5, maybe.
I was thinking about a 6, but I'm like, I feel like a 6 is too low. But yeah, I'm gonna go with a 7 on this one. If we had more backstory, more explanation, I 100% could be a 9. Has the potential to be a 9.
Yeah, I think that's the sad
But
part that it
a
just,
9, 9.5, I could see it 100%. It's just, it wasn't as refined as I would have liked it to be for the final battles in the final stand
yeah.
of these characters.
So 6.5 and 7. So, well,
Respectable numbers
yeah.
on the comic book side comparing our previous review.
Thank you for watching this episode of Galactic Reviews, and I guess this is our second comic book review. So join us next time. We'll be reviewing Joe Frankenstein. I think it's safe to say that.
Yes,
Um,
I don't think we'll be reviewing any other comic books in between then.
until then, we'll see you next time on Galactic Reviews.